Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Wednesday, May 7th. Derek VanRiper, Sarris, Jed Lowrie here with you. On this episode, we discuss a few peculiar happenings from Tuesday night. There were two very bizarre things, one kind of historically unusual, one kind of embarrassing, but also prompting a question like, how do you recover from this? A question that I think Jed can shed some specific light onto. We're going to talk about the Orioles a bit because good teams can have bad starts too. At least that's what I'm attributing this slow start to the Orioles, just kind of bad luck, confluence of events. We'll dig into what's going on there. Maybe some things we would have done differently if we had the GM shoes on for the past year and a half. And then we'll take a look at the Mariners' surging offense. We broke down Julio Rodriguez a couple of weeks ago on the show. Feels like a couple of years ago now. It was a couple of weeks ago. But the Mariners have a top 5 offense. We'll dig into how much of that we believe in through the first month and change of the season. If you haven't joined our Discord yet, you can do that with the link in the show description. If you're watching us on YouTube, smash that like button for us. We'd really appreciate that. Let's start with the weird occurrences from Tuesday. And we're going to start with Ryan Presley's bad day at the office. It was a brutal line. Ryan Presley gave up 9 runs, 8 were earned on 5 hits and a walk without recording an out, adding more than 5 runs to his ERA in the process. I think if you had the story that dropped today, one day earlier, it would have been calling your shot in the most extreme and unfortunate way for Ryan Presley.
Yeah, there's a lot of people claiming that I'm just piling on because of last night, but that's almost a 3,000 word piece that had to be seen by multiple editors and a graphics team. So that was done way before the game. So I have to just get that out there. But I just looked at the closers, or the people that had 3 plus saves and had the worst stuff plus, and he was basically second to worst. I've on the show said that I don't really necessarily trust Luke Jackson, who's on there. Tommy Kahnle does have a good changeup, but I also don't trust like an 80% changeup guy as my closer. I don't know. It's just it's something that I've had stuck in my head ever since Luke Gregerson, was throwing like 60% sliders and never really got the closer job in San Diego. So, it was just a list of closers I thought would basically weren't going to continue in the season. And to be honest, we've also said on this pod since spring that he didn't look right. He wasn't getting the strikeouts. He was nibbling. He didn't seem as dominant as he was in the past. The fastball has really come down to the point where he has to pitch backwards off of the curveball. And that does work for starters, and it can work for middle relievers. I think that's the tie-in here a little bit with Gregerson and Kahnle and Jackson is I don't think you can pitch backwards as a closer. I think a closer has to dominate, has to have a dominant fastball. It's maybe I'm wrong, but I think that's true.
No, I think that you have to have the stuff to get guys out in the zone. You kind of you have to, if as a hitter walking up to the plate that the guy doesn't have the stuff to get you out in the zone, you can be a lot more thoughtful and pick your spots. The pitches in the zone that can beat you, those are the ones that set up the pitches that are out of the zone that are going to get you to chase.
Yeah.
I think has talked about this from a data standpoint before, but Jed, when you'd step in against the closer trailing in a situation where it was going to be curtains without making something happen, how did you change your approach in those situations?
Yeah, it depends on the situation. If you're, it's a 1-run game, if it's a 3-run game, where I'm at, what the situation is. So I think that situation dictates the approach a lot of times in those at bats, right? And that's something that I learned from Terry Francona early on in my career. If you go up there and we're down by 3 and you're you hit a ball good, but it's an out, right? You hit a ball good to the outfield, it's an out. That doesn't really help us as a team, right? And so his whole point is, we got to build a rally here. We got to get guys on base. And, if we're down by one and you get a good pitch, absolutely want to have you let it rip. But I think it's more situational dependent and then player dependent too, right? Like I'm going to be in a very different position, and have a very different approach than David Ortiz is. He's a guy that you don't want him, in a one-run game, or if he's the tying or go-ahead run, you don't want him going up there trying to just get on base. You want him to let it rip. But David also knew in a situation where we're down by 3, he's trying to get something going, right? Because the solo home run when you're down by 3 off a closer doesn't move the needle for the team.
This is exactly why I did not actually like extra inning play before the Ghost Runner, which I don't know if that's controversial, but I did. Extra inning play before the Ghost Runner was, I think, objectively bad baseball, because what it was usually a 1-run game, and what it was hitters going up there trying to jack that win that game, even though it was tie or 1 run. They're always just trying to hit a jack, and all the pitchers do is know that they're trying to hit a jack. So it's like a lot of pitches outside the zone. It's not that many walks. Strikeout rate used to go up through the roof, and the run environment went really low. Like,
yep.
Well,
sometimes
you just see, like, come on, like this kid, like just somebody take a walk, somebody do something other than
I think you think about, like, everybody's tired, right?
That
and
too.
It's like everybody wants to go home, like, it's free baseball, right? Like, we're not getting paid overtime.
Right. Anybody with parents, any parents there with kids that have made them stay there are like, come on.
So yeah, I mean, like I said, the fastest way, the simplest way to score a run is to just hit a homer, right? So if everybody goes up there and is just swinging for the fences, eventually it's going to happen. But when it does, and it just, this feeds into this whole idea of the entertainment value that we've talked about, right? Is like entertainment, home runs are really fun for a very short amount of time. But if everybody's up there trying to hit a home run every single at bat, it's a bad product.
Yeah, that's true.
I wondered when they introduced the Ghost Runner if putting the runner on first instead of second was actually going to be the better way to go, because then you at least give the team that's pitching a chance to get a double play. All right, you give them a little bit of a path out.
Up the incentive,
but you could just walk. Yeah,
you don't want to. You don't want
exactly.
to bunt there.
Yeah, then you got another runner.
Walk the guy. Yeah, you could just put another runner on, and it solves that. If that's the path that you want to take, but yeah, I mean, if you start with, then you're, to Eno's point, like, then you're just bunting and with first and second. So yeah, I think second was the right choice, just because it kind of forces you to play the game too. The whole adage of,
like, everything's on edge now.
Get him over, get him in.
Yeah.
That's where baseball is so
Take
great,
good at
right?
bats.
Yeah, that's where baseball is so great, is that same situation can play out in the first inning, and you're building out the anticipation. There's not a clock. We have the pitch clock obviously now, which that keeps the flow of the game going, and not a lot of waste.
The clock is giving away.
Yeah. Yeah. So, but you can build anticipation through these moments where you have a runner on second and everyone's like, all right, like, we all know what the objective is here. Can you do it?
Yeah, it creates immediate tension having the runner on second instead of on first.
Doubt.
So I think that's where, having seen it play out, I'm glad they chose what they did, because Commissioner Derek would have botched it and put the runner on first.
You would have had. You would have had a legion of statisticians and lieutenants telling you all these things, though, if you were the commissioner, and it would have been a far more considered opinion when you made your choice to put him on second.
I'm glad I wouldn't be left to my own devices.
They considered something at some point where it was like, in the 10th it's a run on first, and in the 11th it's a run on second or something. But I did. It'd be funny to walk out there and run on third and the 13th. It's just that game's over.
Just end it.
Yeah, exactly.
And preserving pitching is important too for the following day, right? Yeah. When you have the pitcher health and just all the limitations on roster space, all these factors, like the quicker you can end a game once you get to extra innings, probably the better for all the reasons that we're outlining. As far as that
amen,
outing goes, yeah, Jed's like, yeah, I've been out here for 4 hours. Like I played in that pre-clock era. Like it's,
and I got to do it, and I got to do it again tomorrow,
Yeah, right.
The amazing thing about the Presley outing, and it got people who don't normally go surfing on StatHead right away to go surfing on StatHead. So if you're on Bluesky or X, you probably saw this already. Hank Borowy was the only other player in baseball history to allow 9 runs in an outing without recording an out. That happened all the way back in 1951. I had no idea who Hank Borowy was, and actually had a good big league career and won the NL ERA title in 1945. So not a footnote in baseball history whatsoever.
I mean, it's not a good list to be on, but there are good pitchers on this list. I mean,
Carlos Rodon's on there.
Yeah, Steven Matz is a decent pitcher, and
is it
Paul
a list
Wilson,
you want to be on
Generation
twice?
K. Yeah.
I mean, that I look at that list and it reminded me of Homer talking to Bart, and Bart saying, "This is the worst day of my life," and Homer corrects him and says, "This is the worst day of your life so far." And it's like something like this happens to you. You're like, "There's no way this happens again." Paul Wilson's twice.
Like, no.
Paul Wilson went 1-1 in a draft. You're right, part of Generation K, and we looked it up before the show. Out of the 3 members of Generation K, who had the highest strikeout rate between Paul Wilson, Jason Isringhausen, and Bill Pulsifer? And we did confirm that it was, in fact, Jason Isringhausen. We had no idea.
Did he do the most in relief?
Yeah, the longest career. I mean, like, I think
longest career too,
just, the different roles, but still just one of those things that got me down the rabbit hole. But yeah, today, I learned who Hank Borowy was. And,
this is part of
title in 1945.
We put LOL Mets to bed on Tuesday with Will Salmon on this podcast. But, part of it was Generation K. And then I think the next one was when they got publication, when they got pub, and people were excited, it went so horribly. So like Generation K, really didn't work out. And the next one was, I think, best infield ever. Do you remember that one?
Who was in the
Edgardo Alfonso on it? And they had something. It was like Ray Sanchez, Edgardo Alfonso, and I don't know, 2 other guys. I forget who it would have been right now, but there was a best infield ever cover that was also didn't go so well. I loved Ray Sanchez though.
Those are tough declarations to make and then have them age well. They really are. You're putting yourself out there. Like you're saying something is the best ever, and it's still a living thing.
It's John Olerud, Edgardo Alfonso, Robin Ventura, and Ray Ordonez.
Yeah, definitely the 4 guys I think of when you said best infield ever. All 4 of those guys popped into my head. With all due respect to them, no, they did not.
All great players.
I made the same mistake. It's a writer thing. Like sometimes you just trying to push the story as far as it can go, and sometimes you push it too far.
So one other pretty odd thing happened, and it happened to the White Sox on Tuesday night. White Sox look like they're in a pretty good spot here on the road in Kansas City, up 3-2. And Cam Boozer induces a nice pop-up. Chase Meidroth moves underneath it, and it bounces off his head into right field. And there was a chance to get the runner at second. Throw from right field, gets airmailed. Could have got the force out. Whole thing wouldn't have mattered. That didn't happen. They go on to lose on the road, which when you're in a position like the White Sox, this stuff just sort of happens. My question for Jed was, when you have a moment like this, just an embarrassingly bad moment, Chase Meidroth's a young player, hopefully going to be a big leaguer for a long time. What do you do in the clubhouse as a teammate, as a manager? What's the response to that? How do you move forward and get him to kind of psychologically move past that moment and just get back to being a young big leaguer, finding his way? Because that highlight and that moment is going to be glued in the minds of White Sox fans for at least a little while.
Yeah, I think, the hope is you can find the humility in the moment, right? But that has to start with the player. Because I think that's it's an embarrassing moment. I think that's one where you're just, as a player, you kind of have to take a step back from the situation. recognize that that's not who you are as a player. And then, I think that the best way to approach that is humility, and it probably will, it will probably allow you to move past it more quickly if you see the humor in it. But that, you want to be very mindful of the personality of the kid. And just, as anybody in a leadership role for the White Sox, just approach that with with knowing what the kid's personality is, and because it probably will be a delicate moment, because that's not, you don't want that on your highlight reel. So hopefully he's got, and it sounds like he's got a lot of opportunities to, create some highlights that will overshadow that.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for Will Venable, and like as a longtime baseball guy, I bet
totally
his instinct would be to, be like, hey, that's using your head out there, just like make a joke out of it. But you do have to be careful.
Exactly.
Like, that could be seen as making fun of him, and that, oh, we're all laughing at you. If it's not a player that, jokes like that, or, so I think you're right. And, I think it's really interesting because this is at the major league level. So, playing time, like how you play dictates it. And it's no longer about, it's no longer as much about your potential and what you could be and developing you. It's more about winning games. And you saw, frankly, some nervous energy out of that dugout, before and after that. They have one successful save out of 4. And Cam Boozer is actually my favorite reliever in that bullpen, and he has a terrible walk rate. So he started us off with walking the leadoff runner. That's the first mistake, and already Will Venable's pacing, and they're even talking in the booth. I think it's the Royals announcers, to be fair, but they're talking in the booth about how they look nervous. And, then that play happens. They don't do that. There's another play that happens at second base where the ball goes to Jacob Amaya up the middle, and Amaya slides and stops it, but he rushes it. He thinks he has to make the play at second. So he tries to do a glove to glove from second, but he's on the ground. So he's on the ground and tries to shove the ball through the air with his glove. If he had just sat up, Chase Meidroth was like 4 feet away from him. If he'd sat up and got the ball out and thrown it, the guy would have been out, No. So, they rushed that play. Jacob Amaya is trying to say, I'm a major league shortstop. I belong. I need this job. Like, this is so there's that tension that comes with trying to win at the major league level with players that are still kind of in that development phase. So that must be, this is something we're going to come back to because it's the theme of the show today. But I think it's so difficult to run a young team like this because they don't have the history of winning, at the major league level. And even the players you bring in may not have had that history. Otherwise, they'd be with somebody else. You know what I mean? Like when you're bringing in, I like Michael Taylor. I'm not saying he doesn't have history in winning. I'm just saying, like, he's not going to be the one who's going to be like, I know how to win. I know how to win rings, and you guys just all get on my back. That's not the type of player Taylor has been. So you have these kind of veterans who are trying to prove that they still, should be, trade for me at the deadline, like they're trying to get off that team, like they're trying to play well enough to get off that team. So they don't really care too much about wins and losses as long as like their name wasn't associated with it, and then you have these young players who are just trying to prove they belong in the major leagues. You have a manager who's trying to prove he belongs. So it's all just really high stress and,
high stress, high emotion. Exactly. I bet you, Chase is looking up at that ball and, given the moment and, none of these situations are lost on players, right? Like, when you're not playing well as a team and like how that pressure mounts, he probably looked up and that ball, it probably looked like a golf ball, and it's going up and
he was looking back at the lights and, I think
the emotion of it all, And I let me just share a story. When I was, I think it was my rookie year, but it was early on in my career. Clay Buchholz is on the mound. We're in Detroit. I'm playing shortstop. He goes to field a ground ball, like a swinging bunt, right? And he goes to pick it up, and he's still young in his career, falls on the ground, right? Doesn't make the play. Let's just say an inning later, I come up, I hit a ground ball with a runner on first base, and I face plant straight out of the box. And Francona comes out later, and maybe it was a reverse situation because he comes out to the mound, and I think it was later the reverse situation because he comes out to give Clay a breather, and his line is like, if I could just keep Lowrie and Buchholz on their feet, I think we'll be okay. And so that's where I talk about the humor of that, right? Like, this is like the ground ball that I hit was, it's not by no means was a routine double play, but like a face plant. They throw the ball down in the second. I think the second baseman at the Tigers at the time, he was like, oh, there's no way we're turning two, and then looked up and realized I was still like 10 feet out of the box and just like lobbed it over to first. So yeah, I can, you're early in your career. The emotions are high. You don't really know what the hell you're doing. You're just living on instinct, right? And when those emotions run high, the game speeds up, and one little thing, all of a sudden I'm running down to first, and I'm face planting the third base batter's box. So emotions change the game.
Having had different, but I'm just taking a cue off this emotions thing, and like I've seen a fair amount of little league managers by this point, and they've kind of run the gamut. And right now I'm sort of having this trouble with this interfacing with this one with it's kind of high energy and kind of like maybe a little bit of whining to the umpire and like pulling players off when they make mistakes, and like my North Pole, like if I had the perfect manager, it would be like sort of Francona. I spent a lot of time around Bochy, right? Bochy, you just stand next to him and you're calmer. Like there's just something about him. It's like the drawl. It's just his energy. He just makes you feel more calm. And I think, and I do think, I'm not saying Will Venable doesn't have this. There's, that's how I thought of him as a player. He's a lifelong baseball rat, like the Northern California. Max Venable is like a well-regarded dude, and Will is his son. They both played in big leagues. He is calm, and he will find this energy. But I think the hardest thing and the most important thing is to broadcast, like, we're going to have another chance. We're going to have another day. You have a chance at redemption. Like, you will do better next time. Like you, like there's something about that energy. Like even that little joke, it's like the joke was affirmative. If I can keep you on your feet, we will be great. You know what I mean? And like, so there's something about that. And I know there's something like Buck Showalter is a successful manager, and he has a slightly different energy feeling to me. But I bet you there's some calmness in the clubhouse that I'm not seeing. There may be an outward bluster towards the umpires or something, and more of a calmness in the clubhouse. But can you speak on that, like, kind of calmness that managers exude, and like how that relates to you as a player?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the manager sets the tone, right? That the personality of the manager is ultimately what the team's energy is. And I love what you said about being affirmative, because there's going to be times where you're going to have hard conversations. And I've had to, I've been on the receiving end of those hard conversations. But I think if the feedback is affirmative, that like, this is something that we can get better at, then I think, and with the understanding that this is a really hard game that's built on failure. And so if you introduce doubt into a player in a game of failure, that is a really simple formula for it to spiral out of control. Yeah.
And I also, I think this feeds into what you said once. I don't know if it was on the pod or just before, because we talk a lot before too. But you said something about like, when you're doing these outreach programs, or when you're talking about building up either a little league, or even if you're like in Brazil, trying to build baseball in Brazil, there's something similar about being a little league manager or doing a program in Brazil, which is that maybe the main focus isn't winning the game. And I know that's tough because you do want to build people who want to win games. I understand you want to win games going forward. I think playing does that. I think players are competitive and want to win games. I think even things like fundamentals, I think they learn from playing. They learn, I need to be there from playing the game. So I think playing does a lot of that. I think as a coach, I think one of the most important things as a coach or manager is to build lifelong baseball fans, I think is the way you put it once. And that requires that sort of calm, affirmative energy. What can we work on? That sort of stuff. So
build. I think that's the foundation for any of this stuff, right? Is you want to teach respect for the game. You want to teach that was something Terry Francona told us every single spring training, respect the game, right? Like I remember even in the minor leagues when he came down and he spoke to us, that was one of the biggest messages that he delivered.
What does that
respect.
Mean,
it means that like you play the game the right way. It means that you learn,
you try hard.
Yeah, that you try, like you respect the game, like you exactly, your effort level is high. You are trying to do things the way that the game, should be played, like just in terms of effort and not making a mockery of it. Like, I think that in my mind, the way I interpret that is like the effort is there. And that you respect your teammates, you respect your opponents, right? Like, of course, you want to go out there and you want to win and you want to be the best you can be.
So, but I think celebration, how does that fit in? Celebration is fine.
Yeah,
if it's sort of about yourself.
If you are celebrating,
what the other person failed or something.
Yeah, like you're celebrating with your teammates, right? Like I think I think celebrating with your teammates is perfectly fine, right? And there's times like at the big league game where emotions are high and there's a history between guys where that creates some drama, but that's at the big leagues, right? Like that's that's a very different entertainment product. That's a very different idea than little league, right? Like we're not we're not looking to get in fights in little league, right? Like the stakes. The stakes are, I understand that they're high and everybody thinks that their kid is going to be the next, Hall of Famer, but the stakes are really not that high. And I think it's more important to respect the game, to build on the love and appreciation of the game, because I think, long term, the best thing we can do for baseball is to build the fan base, right? Build the love of the game, because then we just have more buy-in from every level. Because the numbers don't lie. Like not everybody's going to play in the major leagues, right? And talent is not going to necessarily determine that either. And so I think that if we can take our most talented players at every level and the players that that might not be as talented, and if we can teach them to respect the game and to love the game, then the game in general is in a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's something across like all youth sports is just that realization of fair expectations for your kids, and saying, hey, a few of you at the high school level will go on to play some level of college ball, and of the few of you that do that, maybe one of you will play some level of professional ball. That's the best case scenario for most teams that are out there. And I think everybody thinks the team that they're playing on has more than one kid that could go pro, and I think that's where some of the other problems start to creep in. And I think the other big thing that Eno hit on is just like, you got to have respect for everybody around the game. I think you see stories all the time, parents going off on officials, umpires. That needs to stop. Like that needs to change. That needs to be something that we all collectively do better with, because there's no reason for that. We don't have to take the most heated moments from a major league game and put those on children umpiring little league games. And yet somehow we do that. Not the three of us, but we see people doing this at the parks.
I get it, because the managers themselves are kids inside too, and they want to win, and everybody's there wants to win. And once again, I just think that there's
the value is really just teaching the games and the values of the games and the value of the game and baseball in particular, right? Like, and I think baseball, is a game that most reflects life, right? Like you're going to have way more failures in life than you are successes. And we always say, like, from a hitter's perspective, the best ones fail 7 out of 10 times. So for you to have the confidence to step up there the next at bat after getting out, and knowing that you're going to fail 7 out of 10 times, but still believing when you step in the box that you are going to succeed every single time, right? Every single time I stepped into the box, I knew that I was either going to do exactly what I was trying to accomplish, right? And 99% of the time that was get a hit. Sometimes it was get a guy over or whatever it is. Like, I was going to be successful in what I was going to do in my mind, right?
Yeah.
But then I also knew that, like, that wasn't realistic once that bat was over, right? And like, if I'm analyzing,
so there's almost like
out,
2 Jed Lowries you have to manage as a manager, like the
yeah,
one who's
right,
walking up to the plate and the one who's walking back.
Yeah, because you have to
get both those guys on your team.
Yeah, and you want every single one of your players. And as a player, you want, as a manager, you want every single one of your players going up to the plate or taking the ball on the mound and knowing that he's going to execute every single pitch or he's going to get a hit every single at bat, right? That you want that, like, that level of confidence, but you also don't want it to, like, bleed into this, like, where you have this hubris that now all of a sudden, you're acting as if that's going to happen, right? Like, I think there's a balance of humility with confidence that comes with the game of baseball. And then if you just look at the mechanics of the game, if we're just talking from a position player standpoint, you have a lineup, right? And doesn't matter what position you are in the lineup, you are going to have your opportunity, right? And whatever, if you are prepared or not, your opportunity is coming up to turn, right? Like, you're batting ninth, doesn't matter. Like, whatever you have, whatever you're prepared for that day, you're going to get that opportunity. And, if you're not, prepared, then the odds of you succeeding go down, right? And then on the flip side of that, on the defensive side, you can't hide, right? Every single pitch, you have to think and you have to visualize that ball is coming to you, because the one time you're not ready, that ball comes, your way, and you're not ready. That's when things get embarrassing.
Mm-hmm.
I think baseball lends itself to micro analysis that ends up being loud wrong in the end. I think the ups and downs of 162 games they're natural, right? And I think framing it appropriately can be challenging. I think the vibes right now around a team like the Orioles are like weirdly bad, and I think that's like pent up frustration in the fan base that's deserved. I think you have high expectations that are built upon a multi-year rebuild, building a great farm system, having that taste of success and expecting it to continue for a while. And I think we can sort of connect the dots between some of these things we're talking about and some things that are happening right now with this team. David Schoenfeld at ESPN had a piece that came out today, actually. And the headline was, "Are the O's blowing their contention window?" And the vibes are bad because they're 13-21. Entering play on Wednesday, and they just lost 9-1 on Tuesday night. So they're 8 below 500. And you can look at the surface and say, this is a playoff team the last 2 seasons. Onward and upward. They should be a playoff team again. I picked them to win the AL East. I've already backed away from that for a few different reasons. But part of the reason why it has not gone well for the Orioles so far is a really simple explanation. Gunnar Henderson had an oblique injury this spring that leaked into the start of the season. Adley Rutschman has not played like Adley Rutschman just yet. He hasn't been the same guy since late June. Had that, I think it was a foul tip off his hand. Just hasn't quite hit like pre-June 2024 Adley yet. Jordan Westberg's been on the IL. Golden Cowser's been on the IL. Tyler O'Neill's been on the IL. Oh, those are just the position players. Grayson Rodriguez hasn't started a game yet this year. Zach Eflin's been hurt. Bradish and Wells are still working their way back from major injuries. You add it all up, which Baseball Prospectus does on their injury ledger tool. The wins above replacement, lost to injury by the Orioles this year, second only to the Yankees, which I think is heavily connected to the absence of Garrett Cole and a couple injuries they've dealt with. But this has been a brutally bad luck sort of start, just from a pure health perspective. And that alone makes me say, hey, it's probably not as bad as you think. Even if the Orioles don't make the playoffs this year, they could be one of the first teams out. They could rally, they could make it. All those things are possible. It could spiral. It could turn into a really disappointing year. That's possible too. Like, how do you, as an organization, kind of hit reset on the fly? How do you keep perspective when teams that are historically rebuilt the way the Orioles have been rebuilt tend to have nice long windows? And I think they still could, even if there's a bump in the road in 2025.
Yeah, I mean that's an interesting question. I was just looking at some of the the run differentials here. Like you're talking about a team that's given up 193 runs so far. It only scored 130. So, if you're just looking at expected win losses, they're actually outperforming their run differential right now, which is a little scary. But I think, they have the talent, and I think that, it is young talent, that even though they have had success, they're in a moment in time where they're going through a lot of adversity as a team. And I think it's going to take, manager and team leaders to, step in and, right the ship in a way that, like, we were just talking about, like, everything is going to be okay. We are a talented group. Yes, we need to get healthy. But I think that they need to, like, I think there's a collective effort that, like, look in the mirror and remember who you are as a player. Don't try to be more than who that player is. We don't need everybody to go up there and be a hero. We need everybody to be collectively who they are. And then the results come. And when you start getting into these moments where there are, multiple players that are really talented that start trying to do too much, it tends to, lead to negative performance or drops in performance, because you're actually trying to carry the team by yourself, as opposed to staying within yourself and just being the best at what at your skill set. Right. So I always, when I was going through a bad moment too, I was always, reevaluate where I was, what my mental state was, what I was trying to do, what my intent was. And I think a lot of this boils down to, looking in the mirror and recognizing who you are as a player. And maybe there's conversations that need to happen from a manager and or general manager's position, where they have to set expectations of who each player is. And I'm sure all those conversations happened, but I think there's probably some way to, like, just take a deep breath and reevaluate and say, this is what I need you to be. Adley Rutschman, this is who I need you to be. I don't need you to hit 350 and throw every base runner out. Like, I need you to continue to have these quality at bats, hit the ball hard. Like, I don't, I'm not in that clubhouse, but I think it's ultimately about taking a step back, recognizing who you are as a player, and not trying to be any more than that.
I think there was probably there's some good energy on that regard when it comes to somebody like Cedric Mullins, who last year was struggling a little bit offensively. And I think, there was, like, still this energy, like, hey, you're still our best center fielder. Like, you're going to go out there and play. And he managed to get through that. Now he's blooming offensively again. So, I think some of that is there. There's also just the requirements of, once you have pretty good players, it's hard to necessarily give people runway. I think, there's a couple players that maybe could be helping them right now that are playing for other organizations that, frankly, I can't go back and say revisionist style, like, oh, this is the time they should have given Connor Norby third base and just run with it. Ramon Urias is a capable major league player, and Norby may not have been any better than him in those situations. And I can't say that I can think of right now, like, a place that Kyle Stowers should have played and should have just been given the runway. We've been asking for Heston Kjerstad to get the runway, and he's getting the runway, and he's not necessarily proving that, he needed to get that runway before. So, that's an interesting part that like I think what people will think of, especially we have this. You pointed this out. This is Kyle Stowers homers. Like if you're in Baltimore right now, this is something you don't want to see. It's like,
yeah, Mason Miller versus Kyle Stowers over the weekend. It was a 1-run game. Bases were loaded, 2 outs in the bottom of the 9th. He threw a pitch 102. It was in the zone on the outer part of the plate, and Stowers took it out the opposite way to walk it off. Only 2 homers allowed so far this year for Mason Miller. Brooks Baldwin yanked a 99-mile-an-hour fastball that was on the inner part of the plate out for a homer in Oakland. I don't think it ended up being a blown save, though. I think he still finished that one off, if I remember correctly. But yeah, you see stuff like that, and you see the start Kyle Stowers is having, and you think, oh, come on, like we're not scoring runs, and Kjerstad's not the guy we thought they were. Put on the GM shoes or the president of baseball operations shoes, and they're definitely nicer than the shoes I walk around in. So that feels pretty good. Nice cushion, nice support. Maybe I should buy better shoes. Ask yourself what you would have done differently. And I think if you want to say that they really botched that trade, giving up Norby and Stowers, it's not because they gave up Norby and Stowers. It's because they traded for Trevor Rogers, probably with an idea that they could change some things to fix him. And that hasn't worked out so far.
And I think this is the main. So you have to leave room for criticism. Like we can't just appeal to authority and be, like we can't just be like, oh, they're probably doing the best they can. Like there are things that we can say, we can point at. They're professionals. They're running major organizations. We're in the media. We're allowed to do this. And, so I think the place that I point is actually pitching. Now, I know that their offense is down, but I buy the story that you're spinning here a little bit. Gunner's going to get going. I think Adler's going to get going. I even think Tyler O'Neill's going to get going. But to be fair, if they still had Stowers, they may not have spent the money on O'Neill. They might have had that money for a pitcher. Right. And so I just saw this interesting thing. I saw something floating around that Michael Elias made, admitted he made a mistake. And I was like trying to find it. And it's like something old, actually. It was at the end of the year last year. They had like a sort of end of year press conference. And Michael Elias said, a lot of my moves and concerns at the trade deadline had been toward the pitching side. That sort of ended up not being our shortcoming in the second half. So that's on me. But we're going to take time to look at things professionally, talk to everybody in the warehouse, take every bit of information. We come up with a plan not to have this happen again. So it seems like he's saying, I spent too much resources on pitching. I guess to some extent, maybe I shouldn't have traded Stowers and Norby for Rogers to some extent, right?
Maybe that was because if you make that trade in the offseason, maybe you get a different pitcher. Maybe there's more available in the offseason. We talked about it at the deadline.
Make a trade for better pitching. I think there's something wrong in their pitching evaluation to some extent. And I hate to be like just a stuffist, but Grayson Rodriguez would change us a little bit. So there is a little injury portion to this. But other than Grayson Rodriguez, they don't have a starter that has above average stuff plus. Stuff plus is not everything, but stuff is what the market values, right? So they've, I think, made this idea that like, okay, we're going to value command. Kramer has command. Povich has command. Morton used to have command. Zach Eflin has command. Kyle Gibson has command. Tomoyuki Sugano has a 91-mile-an-hour fastball, but he has a bunch of pitches in command. So it seems like they've made a bet on command. And I think that can be smart more along the margins. So sign Sugano for $13 million and maybe beat the market because he has good command. He has 5 pitches. But internally, try to develop stuff because you need both things to succeed, I think. Number one pitching rotation. This is again about my article today. Number one pitching rotation by Stuff Plus this year. The Philadelphia Phillies. So you got Zach Wheeler. You spent a bunch of money to get him. You got Aaron Nola. You built him up inside. Christopher Sanchez. You traded Curtis Mead for him. You traded an actual, like a good bat prospect, and you've developed him, right? Ranger Suarez. You found him. So like, Jesus Luzardo traded for him, So, they have the best stuff they have the best stuff rotation in baseball, and they worked at it, and they didn't even stop. They were like, we have 4, let's get Luzardo. You know what I mean? Like that kind of energy, I think, is missing when it comes to the Baltimore rotation or pitching staff. It's like, oh, we found some guys and they're going to be pretty good. And I don't know, man, why not be better? Why not spend more money there? Why not, go harder at that? Why not develop more stuff? Why not have a stuffist, in your rotation instead of just a whole bunch of command artists? So I think that's where I would actually come in, maybe the most forceful.
I would follow that up and say, I wonder if their internal philosophy towards pitching is similar to something like what we see in Chicago with the Cubs, where we look at them on the outside and we're like, that's a good rotation when it's all in place, but it's not a great rotation. And it seems like it's command over stuff, or stuff modeled differently in that instance. The other thing there's two other things I was thinking about as you were talking, though. Kyle Bradish seemed like a pretty good, like, hey, this guy's getting better in our organization. Stuff numbers were going up. Arsenal got a little wider, and then he got hurt. So that was a bad break. That happens. Pitchers get hurt. Second point, though, is that they did trade for Corbin Burns, and by all accounts, like they don't miss Joey Ortiz and DL Hall. They threw in a draft.
I don't think that was an
draft
overpay. That was the question on the rundown. I don't think it was an overpay. I mean,
I don't think that was either. I think for 1 year of Corbin Burns, that was fine. And now, again, hindsight's 2020. The more information we have, the easier it is to go back and rewrite history. We're 6 starts into Corbin Burns' new deal with Arizona. Can you find a single Orioles fan that today wants to give him that deal, seeing how his season started with the K rate down, with the shoulder inflammation? Like, things change really, really fast. And I think every front office is going to make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. And I'm not trying to be the Mike Elias apologist either, but I think their issues have been pitching for a few years. They haven't quite made the right deals or changes to their development process to develop enough internal pitching. And we're all sitting here saying, go get an ace. They should have been the team that traded for Luzardo. That was the guy. Like, that feels like the move that got away. The Phillies getting Luzardo instead of the Orioles kind of feels like a big deal right now.
Could they gotten Luzardo when they got Rodgers?
I think Luzardo may have been hurt at the deadline last year, if memory serves me right. So that wasn't there.
Prioritized right now over later, and
right. So anyway, all of this is to say, like, I don't think it's as bad as it looks on the surface, but I do worry that with new ownership in place and the start they're off to, they're hitting that lower end outcome where people's jobs are on the line. Like, they're going to do something to try and make a change, be that hitting coach, pitching coach. So someone
they've already changed
their jobs.
Hitting coaches. They changed pitching coordinator. They've done a fair amount of leadership changes already in the last 2 years.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm looking up their payrolls right now. They got $65 million on the injured list right now. And that, their payroll this year. So I get, I get why expectations are higher in Baltimore. Their adjusted payroll right now, looking at 2025, is $165 million. And, last year they spent 109. So they spent, $55 million more this year. And so
that's the biggest year over year increase in just in payroll looked at that way.
Yeah. I mean, that's a big jump. And so, when you go and you spend the way that they've built this thing up, to, kind of bring in all of the talent that they have, especially on the position player side. And then, they obviously went out and they spent a fair amount of money on the pitching side, right? Bringing in Sagano, Morton, Eflin's making 18. So, Kittredge, they're paying 9. Trevor Rogers only making 2.6. So that one's, and then Bradish and Wells are both an ARB, but those are, 2 pitchers as well on the injured list. So, you start looking at where a lot of this money, is going. A lot of it is on the injured list, and they're going to have to find a way to weather this storm, and stay in the hunt, right? Because you can't win your division. You can't, in April, but you can lose it. And they're kind of teetering on that, especially in a division with the Yankees. And you look at the Yankees, even though they're missing Garrett Cole, they're underperforming their expected win-loss, right? Like that looks like an offensive juggernaut right now. They're outside of the Cubs, have the second highest run scored in the league. Boston is a good team. Tampa's always going to find a way to win. So that's and Toronto is, I think they're competitive, but you got some compression there at the top of the division that they're going to have to weather this really quick. And I'll take it back. Like, I think from a position player perspective too, I think little things help in these situations too, like having a goal greater than yourself, right? Just to help put some wins on the, on that side of the ledger. And I think, getting into doing the situational things that move the needle. I think that is something that they can look at and try to find objectives that are bigger than just yourself.
I keep thinking about the long streak they had going without getting swept in a series. They had one where they either won or split series in division at a record-breaking pace. Like this core has done some really good things too. So I think they can tap into that like in some sort of way and say, hey, look, like we're good. Like we are a good team. We will be a playoff team again. Like this is still something that can all come together. I'm glad you started talking about top-end offenses because our last topic today are the Mariners. We talked about Julio Rodriguez a couple of weeks ago. The Mariners have been a top 5 offense. There is a lot we can unpack here. Like the big question is like, do you believe it? But Jay Jaffe wrote a great piece about this, and it kind of reiterates the fact that they brought Edgar Martinez back. They brought in Kevin Seitzer, who was a hitting coach in Atlanta when that lineup went off just a couple of years ago. And I'm wondering how real this is. Like, do you buy into adjustments, the philosophy of the coaches in the ears of these bats? And Eno's talked about before, we do see players in Seattle, their second year dealing with that ballpark, have better results, getting acclimated to what has turned into one of the most difficult places in the big leagues to hit. So, how much are you buying into the steps forward of this organization, having a guy like Jorge Polanco playing at just a ridiculous level right now? But when you start looking back at what he's done when healthy, it's not as much of a leap if you put it in that sort of context. What's probably more surprising than the power to me is the 11.3% K rate so far this year. That is unbelievable improvement to tack that onto a fast start power-wise.
Yeah, and I think I might have brought this up before, but I just was surfing through their pull in the air percentage and opposite field ground ball percentage, which is now over at Savant. It's called the batted ball profile leaderboard, and you can do it by team. And I thought it was interesting if I took the top 10 in pull air percentage and then looked at the top 10 in opposite field ground ball percentage. There are 3 teams that are top 10 in both, and those 3 teams are the Mariners, Twins, and Tigers. That's funny because I've always thought of the Twins as a pull in the air and damn the torpedoes approach. They've always been top in barrels and strikeouts. Maybe they've added this opposite field ground ball as a 2-strike approach or just a way to soften the strikeout rate. Maybe that's what's happening there. The Tigers, I think sometimes their offensive numbers are masked by their stadium. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if the Tigers have a good approach and are a good lineup. And then here are the Mariners, who've always been high in pull air, but have added this opposite field ground ball percentage this year and are about to have one of the best Mariners offenses they've ever had, which is saying something because this is a team that one time set the record for wins. And I think the thing that stands out, not just for Jorge Polanco and for the whole team, is where they stand in strikeout rate. Despite a home park that it augments strikeouts, they're 17th. They have the 17th highest strikeout rate. So I think that's the key, is sort of a little bit more of a move it along mentality. Maybe move that guy along. Take the ball where it's given to you, and let's put this ball in play. It's also a smart thing to do in Seattle because, being too pull air focused in Seattle and being too power focused in Seattle, I think is not a great idea because it's cold there and it's not going to really reward fly balls the same way. So, if I had a team in the old Oakland, if I had a Giants team that I was running, or if I had a Mariners team I was running, I would consider this approach. Number one in opposite field ground balls, just so you know who it is. It might be obvious. I'm going to keep talking for a second so you think about it. It's the Padres. The Padres, who now have the best strikeout rate in baseball. And maybe they're pushing it a little bit hard because they're reaching up pitches outside the zone and their barrel rate is really low, but it's working. Tatis, like Polanco, has cut his strikeout rate in half. They're getting timely hits, and part of getting timely hits is getting hits. So,
I
take your own luck a little bit by putting the ball in play.
Yeah, well, and once again, like it just I've said this before. It's all intent, right? So if you're going up there with the intent to try to pull a home run every single time, you remove. First of all, you're not going to get the pitch at the major league level to be able to do that every single time. Like, these guys are way too good. The stuff is too good. The execution is too good. But you have to have the intent. You have to have the intent that if you get the pitch to do that, that you're ready for it. But then the ultimately the situation will dictate some of that, right? And if you just have a bunch of guys going up there trying to hit pull air home runs, inevitably the pitchers are good enough and have good enough stuff to prevent that from happening. It might happen every once in a while, but that's where intent matters more than anything else. And with the intent of, you said it earlier, take what you're given. It changes the dynamic, because now all of a sudden, if you're ready for the opportunity when it presents itself to pull that ball in the air on a pitch that you are actually capable of doing it on, then you're ready to do that, right? And so if the intent is results based, then you're going to change your approach to try to get a specific result. If the intent is more process based, then the results happen.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what the cue has been, is just changing what you're trying to do in your process. And the pull quote that I thought, at least it could have been the pull quote from this, was something that came up in an MLB.com piece. It was Jorge Polanco talking about Egger. He said, when Egger got here, he just preached on that middle of the field approach. Everybody knew who Egger was, so we just listened to him trying to work on that. So I took it to the offseason. And Jay's piece at Fangraphs, Jay Jaffe's piece, breaks down how Polanco's also changed on the left side of the plate. He's also swinging the bat harder. Some of that could be how he's orienting himself at the plate. But there's
some injury too,
like it being healthy too, right? Like it's like ticking 3 boxes all at once. Like you made a mechanical change, you got healthier, and you've changed what you're actually trying to do. All of those things can make some pretty massive adjustments happen.
From a luck standpoint, I don't use this too often, but if you're talking about like who's over their skis when it comes to xWOBA, just their expected production versus their actual production, yes, you're going to find that some of these guys are over their skis. Like Jorge Polanco has a 466 xWOBA, he has a 479 WOBA. Those two numbers are maybe closer than you think. That's not that lucky. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And then you start looking at other ones, xWOBAs and their actual xWOBAs, and there's not another player on this team that is lucky by that number. I guess the closest is Dylan Moore with a 376 WOBA and a 361 xWOBA. Again, two numbers that are pretty close together. So this isn't a team that like you're going to be like, oh yeah, they're just getting lucky. I think this is a good approach. Maybe some players that have been undervalued. When I think of JP Crawford, I think of a type of player that is undervalued, which is he controls the zone, and he's added some bat speed over the years. And now he's putting together, one of his better seasons offensively, and he's doing it at a time where, he's near peak age, and that describes some of their other guys. And then I think Julio is going to get going. We've broken him down enough, but this is a team. Cal Raleigh is a go get it type hitter. He makes contact out in front of the plate further than anybody else in baseball. And that might be problematic if your whole team did it, but it's kind of cool to have one guy who does it because he has the most homers on the team. And if you need a homer, it's a great time to have Cal Raleigh come up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They get different types of hitters in that lineup. They get different guys with different functions, like putting kind of different problems in the minds of opposing pitchers.
Yeah, you don't want Cal Raleigh going up there and just trying to, carve balls the other way, right? Like the intent the intent will be dependent on the individual and the approach that player is best suited at producing. So I think, but once again, like I think knowing who you are as a player and really focusing on your intent unlocks more potential than, like, of course, if we were just playing home run derby, the idea would be to just pull the ball in the air, right? But that's not what this is. You have somebody trying to get you out 60 feet away, not just put it in there. So that's where I always come back to intent.
They also, one thing that they do, at least on the margins, is they value athleticism in a way that's maybe not obvious. Luke Raley has like top end sprint speed and a top arm and hits the ball really hard. And people are like, well, he's not that great against left-handers and he strikes out too much. Well, what about the other good things he does? And Dylan Moore is cut. That dude's cut. And he's just like this cut dude that can play every position. And he strikes out too much, or he may not be an everyday regular at any one position, but that's a really valuable player to have on your team.
And I will once again say, go look at the career home road splits for Dylan Moore. If Dylan Moore's career happened somewhere else, we'd probably talk a lot more about him. He's been a good player outside of T-Mobile, which, as we said earlier, it's become the toughest place in baseball to hit. We need to go, but I think we're collectively in on this Mariners lineup transformation being mostly real and sustainable. Maybe they're not top 5 all year, but they're certainly better than they were as a group a year ago, I think, when the dust clears at the end of 2025. And if they get healthier in that rotation, there you go. Maybe this is the year they get back into the postseason and make some noise. On our way out the door, a reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic, theathletic.com/rates and barrels. Find Eno on Bluesky, Sarris.bsky.social. I'm dvr.bsky.social. Jed's not there. Jed's on Instagram. Thanks to our producer, Brian Smith, for putting this episode together. That's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. We're back with you on Thursday.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.